Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a model showcase video, or I should say it's a double feature model showcase video for these two cartoon caricaturized M24 Chaffee light tanks. Both of these models here are built for my own personal collection and are not for sale and or purchase. However, like I often mention in these build videos, I frequently take on commission build projects from models ranging between 1/35 scale and 1/6 scale. For availability and pricing information, that information would be best by contacting me through the email address listed below, which is info@eastcoastarmory.com. Both of these models here have been built predominantly out of the box, and we'll be going over all of the kit's features in this video. In addition, we're also going to be giving both of these models a thorough in-box review. So stay tuned because there's going to be a bit of info coming right at you. To start this video off, let's take a quick walk around these two models. And these two vehicles here are the M24 Chaffee light tank. Or at least that's what they're supposed to be. What they actually are caricaturized version of the M24, and these two particular models here are actually video game merchandise from the video game War Toons. Which, yes, if you go ahead and check your calendars, or specifically the date when this video was uploaded, you will see that it reads April 1st, 2023, which means this is one of the EastCoastArmory.com's channel tradition of posting caricaturized models on April Fool's Day. War Toons is a video game. I believe it's a virtual reality video game. It's been around for a number of years now in a few different flavors. Originally, the game, apparently, when it came out, was for the PlayStation. However, in recent years, it has been reshifted to other platforms. More information about the video game can be found on the War Toons Facebook page or on their website, of which I will be posting the links below in the video description. What is interesting about the video game is the art style. It has this cartoonish art style, and all of the figures as well as the vehicles that are in the game are all in this type of stylized format. It's fairly unique. However, what's really interesting is that when the creator of War Toons went ahead and made the video game, he also wanted to have some video game merchandise in the form of plastic models. So he contacted the Meng Model Company, who's primarily known for high-end nicely detailed and engineered plastic model kits, and he offered them a partnership to produce his vehicles for his video game. They agreed, and Meng actually went and produced quite a range of these caricaturized plastic models from the video game. And these vehicles all have the look and the feel of the vehicles in question, in this case an M24. However, the proportions are all skewed and shifted in order to give you the unique art style that you see presently on this model. Over the last number of years since these models have been in production, Meng would constantly reintroduce brand new models, and because of that, the collection actually has grown to quite a large number. The vehicles that are represented are from the USA, Germany, France, as well as also Great Britain and Russia, to name a few. All of the vehicles I just mentioned all have this cartoonish style look to them, and also, most importantly, all these kits are known to be very affordable and also very easily assembled, which we'll be going over as this video goes on. Before we go any further with the video, let's go ahead and take a step back to when these two were first started in order to get a good idea on what the base starter kit supplies you with. And here are the two models at the start of the build. For the base starter kit, I'll be utilizing two of these cartoon scale War Toons M24 Chaffee characterized model kits. These two over here are really new additions to the stash. I picked them up about a month ago from eBay, and they finally arrived, so I'm going to start on them because time's a ticking and April 1st is quickly approaching. So it's best that I get to these sooner than later. Since both models are the exact same kit, there's no point having them both here on the table, so I will remove one momentarily. However, before I do, one thing I do want to mention, this circles back to the graphic design on these kits, is this is a trademark found on all the War Toons models, and that is how the graphic design is laid out. If you note, the way the things are designed is so that they're in a store shelf type setting, and you will have this continuous banner running across the scenes. So you can have a bunch of these box arts lined up, and you'll have a really cool effect, as you can see here, how they just all plug into each other with the way everything was illustrated and laid out, which is a really nice touch found on the War Toons kits, and it's found on all of the models in the range. Some of the earlier kits, namely the Sherman, the Panther, and the Tiger, it was the exact same type of layout. However, the color here was brown as opposed to the later production ones, which switched over to this black color. So that is an interesting thing I did want to mention. However, the way you see it here with the diagonal lines. This is something that is found on all of the World War Toons kits, or at least all the ones that I've actually worked on. So with the other model off the table, let's go ahead and take a closer look here of what the actual box art and graphic design gives you with this kit. Here we have the M24 Chaffee in its cartoonized art style. The art style on the box is basically what you see on par with the other kits in the World War Toons lineup, where it has this cool painterly type relief, and you know, again, it gives you the nice look and feel of the game in a 2D box art type form. The remainder of the graphic design is quite typical. Here we have the Meng logo, or I should say it's Tony Montana's favorite company, and it's WWT-018. Here we have the World War Toons logo. Right over there, we have the little gear motif, and then this one here has the green type, or I should say the green coloring here, and this is different on other models, or I should say other kits in the range, where I've seen blue, and I believe another color comes to mind, but for the M24 here, it's green. We have that really cool typeface, which is found in all the World War Toons kits. Here on the side of the box here, we have a built example of the model in question. And here we have the game developer, and this one is a later kit, of course. That's why it has the Rascali logo here, as opposed to the earlier kits when the game developer had the name of Rookvan. As for all this information, well, this is best if you watch the video where I actually interview the creator of the video game, and that can be found in the, actually it can be found in the video description listed below, as well as on the ECA channel. Besides that quick shameless plug, here you have the other little info here, namely all the social media sites that the game developer is found on. Here we have the side tab here. We have a bigger thumbnail of the artwork in question, as well as the other typography, which is an exact same mirror image on the opposite side. On this side here, we have some other models in the World War Toons lineup, such as the M5 Stuart, the M4A1 Sherman, and the M26 Pershing, which, by the way, as another quick shameless plug, I've actually built an example of all three of these kits, and they too can be found on the ECA channel in the miscellaneous model playlist, which again is found on the channel. So all of them are nice and organized for your enjoyment. In addition to that, we also have one of the specialty ones here, where it's a Santa Claus version of the M4A1. It's another fun little kit, and there are some interesting ones like this that are special edition releases, and again, more information about that can be found basically on a Google search, but that's out of the realm of this video. Here we have some more corporate information right here, a barcode, and what's cool is on the back side we have some more graphic design. We have more World War Toons advertisements, and this is what the model looks like in-game, which is a pretty cool thing. I will say though, James, if you are watching this, and I'm pretty sure you are, please fix the track direction over here on these tracks. It always bugs me when the tracks are modeled in the upside down state. The V's are always pointing down, not up. So if you're watching this, make that little change. I know it's a real simple thing to do in the what's that called? The texture that you probably use for your track thread pattern. Regardless, here we have some more information over here. Of course, it's Olga approved, as are all of the World War Toons kits, and we have some more information right here about the kit in question. So, cracking open the box to reveal the contents, just like with all the World War Toons kits, they are a side opening tab, which is something that's generally not really commonly done or seen on most model tank kits that are on the market. And just like with all the other World War Toons kits, it's all self-contained in this nice little bag over here. As another quick mention, just like with the other World War Toons kits, this is an all-encompassing plastic model kit. What I mean by that is everything is injection molded plastic with the exception of the tracks, which are single-piece vinyl. The other thing to mention is that there's no other type of amenities like CNC brass stuff, 3D printed items, or any other of those type of things that you see on some other kits out there, even from Meng, like things like photo etch. This here is just no frills, old school plastic model kit, and there's really nothing wrong with that. Having said that, there are actually a lot of individuals out there who actually have their own little cottage industry of coming up with hop-up detail components in order to upgrade the details on the stock kit, or even convert it to something completely different, which is actually really, really cool. But regardless, the kit here is all molded in this green ABS plastic, and I will mention that as the video goes on. And as for the difficulty, these World War Toons kits have a stigma of being ridiculously easily built, and this is something that I've personally seen on many of their other kits in the past, and I have no illusions that this kit here will be identical to that experience. So opening up the box, unlike the other ones, this one here is actually stapled in place. The other ones I think were hermetically sealed, if I'm not mistaken. Since I only build these once a year, it's a little bit hazy sometimes. So open that bad boy up. and I dump out the kit contents. Touch upon the instructions momentarily, but here goes the kit parts. Starting with the lower hull here, as you can see, it's a single molding. Just like with the other World War Toons kits, it's a fairly thick bit of casting, which is actually good. It makes for a nice sturdy model. It gives it a little bit of weight and just makes for something that feels a bit higher quality compared to something that's molded a little bit thinner. The model has some basic suspension detail components molded in place. We have the typical peg type system where the wheels undoubtedly will plug onto as the construction commences. And we also have several sections over here for cutouts for other details, which will be added in place. Inside here, we just have some information. These kits here apparently came out in 2021, which is interesting because it's been, I believe, a little while since I actually seen them, or the first time I encountered one. But regardless, there's the copyright info on the mold itself. From here, we have the turret, which definitely has the look and the feel of an M24 Chaffee turret. We do have functional hatches with these open hooks. However, like I've mentioned on past builds, these hooks do work. However, they're a little bit on the chintzy side, I always found, and it's always best to have a full hinge. If this is something that works for you, perhaps you just might want to model it either in the open or closed state, or you just don't open it or close it very often. This is something that generally usually holds up okay, but after use tends to wear out quickly. But I'll circle back on that later on as the video goes on. Regardless of that, we have the bustle bin here in the back, we have the area here in the front for the mantlet, and it has the overall look and feel, like I stated before, of the M24 Chaffee turret. Here we have the main sprue, which consists of, well, clearly the upper hull. And if anyone knows Chafees, it's a Chaffee. We have that distinctive stop sign shaped axis hatch right there on the front of the hull. It's probably the most distinctive bit of detailing found on the M24 family. It's also one of my personal favorite. And we have here the air intakes on the back where the exhaust manifolds will go. We have the M24 sliding bow hatches all there. We have the tin work, and the tin work has the double step to it, which again is iconic for the M24 Chaffee. And that personality was shrunk down and brought into the cartoonish aspect that we have here. Outside of the hull, we have just, regular details. We got here an antenna base, where it's supposed to be an MP48, and it actually does look like an MP48. Kudos to Mr. James for working that in. We have here the bow headlight cluster with the brush guards. We have lift hooks. We have the 75. It is molded hollow, which is an excellent touch, and it's something that's seen on many of the other World War Toons kits. We even have here the US AFV searchlight, and that too has been molded nice and hollow. Excellent job. We have here the mantlet. Again, it's an M24 Chaffee. It looks and feels like an M24 Chaffee, and if it looks like a duck and sounds like a duck, we already know how that statement ends. Here we have the front transmission blisters right there and there with the iconic 4 bolts on them. Here's the loader's hatch and the bottom turret pan. Some other details to mention are just some lift hooks, some grab handles, and even a tow hitch, which is also, again, a very nice touch. From that takes us to the next runner, which has some parts that are popping off, but everything appears to be here. And this is the running gear. So we have the wheels, which are screaming M24. They have some nice fastener details on the hubs, and they have the look and feel of the other World War Toons vehicles with similar type of road wheels. We have here the sprocket. What's really cool is that the sprocket holes are molded hollow. It's an excellent touch. Generally, that's something that I have to drill out with a pin vise, but on this one here, it's already taken care for you. Again, kudos to the engineers that designed this kit. And here we have the hubcaps and the stems, which are in much along the same lines as the other kits in the lineup. If you've built the M24, I'm sorry, the M26 Pershing kit, this is basically rinse, wash, and repeat. On this side here, and on a similar note, we have here the front lift hooks, which again, just like we see on many of the other World War Toons kits. And here we have the top return rollers, as well as some other grab handles and fittings. Again, if anyone has built the other World War Toons vehicles, this runner here should be very familiar to you. Continuing on, here we have that sprocket. Like I stated before, it is nice and hollow. Oop, you can see, hopefully, once it focuses in. We have here a bit of detailing. I'm not sure what that is at the moment. Looks like some kind of a mud flap, but we'll see how that goes on as the build continues. A return roller, and here we have the bow MG. What's cool is that on this one here, the bow MG is also molded hollow. This is a big improvement compared to some of the earlier kits where it was just molded flat, and generally I always have to go in there with a pin vise and hollow it out. For this one here, that's not going to be the case. And here we have the water slide decals. Just like with all plastic models, they are a water slide decal type setup. And the Meng ones here are the same type of quality you find on their other excellent kits, as well as the other kits in the World War Toons lineup. And from what I've seen on the other models that I've built in, not just the World War Toons lineup, but from Meng in general, the decal quality is excellent, and they shouldn't have any problems as the model gets painted as well as varnished. But we'll see how that pans out as the video progresses. The other thing to mention are the tracks. The tracks, single-piece vinyl. Thank you for making them single-piece vinyl. As we know, I can't stand individual Lincoln length. And they are quite typical what you find in the World War Toons lineup. They are a single piece, quite literally a single piece. There's no attachment points or anything else. And the detailing on them is actually really, really good. Here we have the face detailing right there. Hopefully the camera zooms in or focuses in, and you can see the chevron, the rubber chevron type thread pattern found on the M24 Chaffee. We have some nice detailing on the sides of the track bands. And on the inside here, we just have a stylized little segment on either side to align where the wheels go, and we even have some track link detailing right here on the inside. Obviously, it's a caricaturized model, so the detailing is going to be very simplistic compared to what we typically expect, but the quality of the moldings are actually very good. These are on par with the other kits that I've done from the World War Toons kits in the past, and they always yield for some excellent results. Last but not least takes us to the instruction manual. Oh, there's one more little loose part over here. Looks like a shell ejection port, but we'll see again as the video goes on. And here we have the instruction manual. Just like with the other World War Toons kits, the instructions are very nicely illustrated and are well above what we generally see on plastic model kits, where we just have some CAD files, or on older kits as I usually build, some kind of a hand-drawn type system. For these ones here, they are CAD, but they have some very nice showmanship to them. So here we have, the cover right here. You open it up, some very nice graphic design, kit count right over here, as well as the actual construction, which is all done via CAD. Everything is nicely colored, and I've had some excellent results with these instructions in the past, and they are usually very well thought out. Sometimes on some of the kits, depending on the kit in question, the sequence I personally switch around a little bit to better make it, or better suit the model to my painting techniques. But generally speaking, the instructions, what you see is what you get, and they have worked on many of my other past builds, and I'm predicting no different with this one here. In the back, we have a nice little color chart. Now, as we saw from the opening portion of the video, one is going to be built basically in this format with the marking layout, but the other one's going to be a little bit different, and we'll circle back to that as the video goes on. So starting with the model suspension, first there's really nothing much to go over here. The suspension on this model is super easy to assemble, so much so there's really nothing to mention. The pieces go on their appropriate locations, and when you're painting them, for this one here, I went ahead and painted the tires to cover the outer section, which again was basically something I was inspired from the box art. For the track, this is where this model gets a bit interesting. You see, like I mentioned before, the track on this model represents the rubber chevron version of the Chaffee track, and the kit does a decent job rendering it. Also, with the type of material that it's rendered in, it does an excellent job with mimicking the rubber found on the actual chevrons. So for this model here, I believe I did something that I haven't really done so much on other builds, and that is with the paintwork. Normally on my builds, I paint the single piece vinyl tracks with Tamiya a flat black, and of course this is something I always mention, don't use spray paints or enamels, it could potentially harm the rubber on these models. However, instead of painting the track with the flat black as the mentioned in other videos, I used only the paint on the end sections. For this one, the end connectors are painted with Tamiya olive drab, and this is something that I've mentioned in a few other videos. American tanks, you have a few options for the end connectors or some of the metal bits. Sometimes they're parkerized, other times they had a primer coat of olive drab on them. It just depends on the the track vendor in question. Regardless, for this one here, I went with the olive drab approach. Tamiya olive drab, applied with the paintbrush, it's basically done within like 2 minutes or so. Where things get interesting on this model are with the inner and the outer track sections themselves. Like I mentioned before, these are rubber on the real unit, and they are also rubber on the model, so there's really no point to paint rubber to look more like rubber, now is there? So on this one here, I actually left the rubber in its El Natural material, but I went ahead and weathered it to the way you see it here. This was done with the airbrush, where I took diluted flat white and I airbrushed onto these sections, and once it dried, it gives you the look that you have presently. With the tracks painted, they definitely look the part, and it's a nice alternative compared to my usual painting techniques for these American tank tracks. The tracks themselves are fully functional, as is the model. As you can see, I could go ahead and play with the tracks a little bit, and because the tracks are not painted with the base coat, it will not chip away in nearly the same manner as it would if the tracks were thoroughly painted with the other painting technique. Having said that, though, I'm not exactly going to play with my models because I just don't want the paint to chip off some of the other locations. Having said that, though, just like with all the World War Toons kits, these models do have some playability to them. From the suspension takes to the remainder of the model's details, and these went on without any sort of problem, specifically on the lower hull. Where things get a little bit interesting, however, are on the rear engine deck with these grab handles, and this is something where I did run into a bit of friction on both of these examples that we have here. On both of these models on the rear engine deck, we have these small little handles found in the various locations. These are kit supplied and are decently rendered out of the box. However, I found that these handles here are actually quite frail and fragile. And when it came time for the larger ones, these I was able to remove off of the sprues with some pretty good results. The ones that I had great difficulty with, however, are the two smaller ones that we have here and here. I believe these are also the same ones found here on the top sections. For some reason, I had some really hard difficulty with trying to remove these sections off of the sprue and do so in an efficient manner. And I did end up cracking a few on both examples. On the ones on the top here, I was able to clean them off of the sprue without any sort of problems. It was a bit hairy, but I was still able to make do. However, the ones here that I utilized for the last two on the rear engine deck, they failed completely. So much so that instead of utilizing the kit ones, these ones here are actually made out of thin metal floor wire. One of the sections broke off. I had to commit and replace the other one as well because this is the best way to ensure continuity. This happened to both of my examples that we have here. So if you are working on one of these Chafees, be aware that you may be potentially breaking these small little handles upon sprue removal. And keep in mind, I am using clean cut snips, much along the lines of like these ones over here, and I still had the difficulty with removing these pieces in a solid, unbroken manner. Fortunately, replacing them wasn't a problem. I basically just drilled out the sections with a pin vise, and I made some new handles out of some floor wire. Once they were added in place and everything gets painted, everything just blends right in. Moving to the bow section, again, all the details here are stock with the kit and went out without any sort of problems. Same was true for not just this example, but also for the other example that is currently off screen. The remainder of the work is focused on the turret. The turret goes together pretty easily, and there is a small little seam where the two halves conjoin, but again, nothing too egregious, and it's something that's easily polished away in a matter of minutes. The other detailing consists of the various sort of amenities which would be found on the M24 Chaffee's turret, like the searchlight, the grab handles, the pintle mount, and also the shell ejection port for good measure. The little grab handles also very nicely rendered, and everything goes on in their appropriate locations without really any too much manhandling required. The one thing I do want to mention is on the antenna base. It does replicate an MP48 spring antenna base. Again, very nicely rendered. I do want to stress that, to an nth degree. And on the paintwork here, it's done in my usual format, where actually the MP48 is painted with a slightly different shade of olive drab compared to the remainder of the vehicle. And then, of course, the insulator section is painted with hull red with a little sheen of gloss coat on it for good measure. This is always something that I mention in these American videos. Paint your MP48s because the detailing is there, and if you properly paint it, it just makes the model really, really shine. Aside from the MP48, one other modification I made to boat examples was with the mantlet. The mantlet here has these two lift rings that are integrally molded in, and they are solid on the kit. So with a pin vise and a small little Dremel bit, I simply just drilled them out to the appearance that we have here, and it's again an easy way to enhance the detailing overall. On the top portion of the model, we have here the two hatches. The loader's hatch, which is fully functional, as you can see, and it's also true on the opposite model, as well as also the cupola hatch. The cupola hatch is a little bit more complicated than one might imagine, specifically for one of these models. The cupola hatch is comprised of three components. We have the hatch as well as the two hinges. When everything is properly assembled, the hatch will be able to fully open like the way you see it here. However, one thing that the builder needs to pay attention to is that you're working with these three pieces and they can be a bit fiddly, specifically when it comes time for installation. The way I installed it in a way that simplified the assembly was I installed one of these hinges first, with the glue of course, then the other hinge is clipped onto the hinge mechanism on the hatch, and then the entire unit is just locked into place when it gets mounted to the turret. This is one way to speed up the assembly and also to make sure that everything doesn't, fall off on you during the installation, which is something that can happen generally when you're trying to, hold a multi-piece assembly like this together during the install. As I mentioned before, the hatch's functionality is present on both of my examples right over here, and they do work quite well. On the loader's hatch, this does clip into place. Now, like I mentioned before, the loader's hatch hinges are somewhat on the weaker end in comparison to the cupola hatch over here. However, I've seen that they work very well, but it's one of those things you want to be careful with during the install. It has to clip in place, and if you put a little bit too much stress on it, you could potentially break the hinges found on the top. And once the hinge cracks off, you're not going to be able to repair it. Specifically repair it in a way where you can keep the hatch functional. Briefly jumping ahead to the paintwork takes us to the periscope prisms found on the panoramic cupola. These are integrally molded into the model, and they were simply carefully painted with a very fine paintbrush. Gloss black is what I use for my periscope prisms, and this is something that I frequently mention in these videos. And that's all there really is for the detailing, and this brings us to the paintwork. When I saw that the War Toons lineup was going to include M24 Chaffee, I instantly knew I was going to need more than one for this project. The first one I wanted to build as a standard USGI M24 Chaffee from the late World War II timeframe or the early Korean War timeframe, which at that time the US Army would have more than likely had a darker shade of olive drab compared to the shades that came earlier. So for this model here, the darker shade of OD was more than appropriate, and my darker shade of OD is the same one I've touched upon in a few other videos. It's my own personal mix, and it's just exterior latex that's applied to the model via the airbrush. Once the paintwork is applied, it was then weathered to the condition that we have here, utilizing my usual techniques, which include counter shading, sun fading techniques, as well as also some dry brushing. Filters are not utilized on this example over here because in that would tend to change the color to another type of technique, but that's something I really didn't want to incorporate on this build, and this was really more or less the look I was going for this particular rendition of my M24. However, for the secondary M24, I knew immediately what the second version was going to be, and that was going to be with a Korean War tiger face job. The M24 was one of the vehicles outside of the M46 Patton and the M4A3E8 Sherman to receive the tiger face. Although on the M24 it's a bit more unique because it's not really a tiger, or at least it's not what it appears to be to me. I always refer to it as the eagle face because it just looks more, avian in its representation as opposed to feline. Regardless, I wanted to apply that killer paint job on one of these examples. So for this one over here, I went with the same painting technique that I touched upon in my M46 Tiger Face patent videos, which again are also found on the channel. And I painted with the exact same formats. One of those techniques where if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So for the green, I use a new shade of olive drab that I cobbled together a little while ago. And as I touched upon before, during the late World War II, early 1950s time frame, there was more of a grab bag of olive drab shades out there, from the dark shade to some of the lighter shades. So it was a little bit weird, and this means it gives a lot of variety out there for us modelers. For the yellow face itself, oh, and by the way, this of course is again my own exterior latex mix and applied via the airbrush. For the yellow, this was Tamiya flat yellow, and unlike the other one where it was applied via the airbrush, for this one here, all of the yellow work was paintbrush applied. The reason why I went with the paintbrush was because of the smaller working areas compared to the larger ones found on the other examples, namely, again, those M46s. Because of the smaller areas, the paintbrush was more than suffice for the job at hand, and I had far more precision and control with the paintbrush as opposed to trying to mask everything up with the airbrush. So the paint was applied via the paintbrush, and I was able to execute the task without any sort of problems. Which, by the way, for flat yellow, that is an achievement, because if anyone's ever worked with yellow, you'll know it's one of the harder colors to mess around with. The trick with working with yellow, specifically Tamiya flat yellow, with a paintbrush no less, is that you have to have it with the proper consistency. If you just open up the bottle and apply straight from the bottle, you're going to run into issues where the paint being slightly too thick, and it can potentially cause problems with brush strokes. If the water is slightly watered down, you will be able to apply it in a much flatter manner. However, it's not going to be one of those things where you do in one shot. It's going to take 2, possibly 3 coats of yellow, or I should say 3 coats of the paint, to get the opacity up where it's like the way you see it on this model here. Once the opacity is where it's at though, and the paints were thinned out appropriately, you'll see that at least for some very flat results, which is exactly what you're looking for. The remainder of the tiger face paint was done again by hand, exclusively with the paintbrush. This includes the mouth, the teeth, the nose, the outline, as well as also the eyes. For the red color, this was Tamiya flat red, and for the black, this was Tamiya XF1 flat black. The teeth were the only colors that were used on the tiger face that were not Tamiya, and were just standard flat exterior latex. Again, the trick is you have to thin it properly so that it applies in a flat manner. Once the paintwork was applied, the model was then continued into its weathering phase with the use of the sun fading, the counter shading, as well as also the dry brushing. Once everything was concluded, the final outcome is the way you see it here. For the model's markings, this one over here, I went with the stock marking option, and I basically put the markings on in the locations and with the markings that were supplied with the kit and referenced in the instructions. Just like with all the World War Toons models, the markings are very well laid out in the instruction manual. The markings are in excellent quality on the World War Toons models, and these ones here were no exception. They went on without any sort of problems, and both models here had their markings sealed on with the VMS matte varnish for all the positive attributes that that product has that I've touched upon in a number of videos. The difference, though, between the two examples was with the type of markings that were used. Obviously, for this one here, since I went with the tiger face, I wasn't exactly going to be utilizing all of the markings that were supplied with the model, but some of them were going to be necessary. For this one here, the only markings that I kept were the TO&E markings, namely the ones that we see right over here. On the kit, they want you to mount them on the front, but, you know, I went ahead and put them in their more quote-unquote appropriate location right here on the rear section. And also, I recycled the stars. The 2 stars are right here on the top, on the hatch, and the other one's right here on the engine deck. All of the stars I just mentioned were, again, supplied with the kit, and no other changes were made. I just mounted them in a slightly different location. Again, because the quality of the markings were excellent, they were able to be adhered to both these models here, and both of the models were then sealed off with the VMS matte varnish, giving you for the end result that you see presently. One other thing I want to mention about the weathering on an M24 is that unlike other vehicles where it has an external type exhaust manifold, the M24's exhausts are concealed under this grating that we have here on the rear engine deck. So for the weathering, I just took some airbrushed Tamiya flat black and applied the 2 little poofs in the following sections, giving you for the end result that you see here. Briefly jumping ahead to skill level and recommendation, one thing that's awesome about the World War Toons lineup is that not only do they have the M24, but a little while ago they also released the bigger brother, the M26. So if you have the M26, getting the M24s here are an excellent way to round off the set. As you can see, all 3 of them work very well with each other. Although not necessarily in scale with each other or in proper proportions, but hey, World War Toons, so, you know, everything is on the table. One other thing that I want to mention also is that these are literally the first M24 Chafees that I've ever built in any scale, which is hilarious because, I'm a huge olive drab guy and I've done, lots of models in my time. But the M24 was always a kit that eluded me in one flavor or another. I always thought the M24 was kind of cool, and I specifically love the Korean War stuff, so, a tiger face one would definitely be on my hit list. But, it's just one of those models that just never crossed paths with me. There are lots of M24 kits on the market in 135. You have the kits from Italeri, and then there are the newer ones from AFV Club and Bronco, I believe, and all of them are excellent. I do want to snatch up some, but, those are, again, more or less, topics for another video for another day. But it is funny that these are the first time I've ever done an M24 Chaffee, and it's in this, World War Toons format, in either flavor, as a standard, classy OD, or with the, hot rodded tiger face paint one like we have here. And at the end of the day, there's really nothing much more I could have wanted or anticipated out of a build like this that I didn't receive with the final outcome. The build experience was nearly perfect on not one but both occasions, which of course is not too unexpected considering that these World War Toons kits are always a very pleasant experience to work on. Which is the perfect point to pivot us into skill level and recommendation. Of course, with the subject matter at hand, if anyone have ever seen the other World War Toons videos that are found on this channel, first, if you have, thank you, and if you haven't, I recommend checking out the playlist that these models are found in, because I've done basically at this point almost every one of the World War Toons kits that are available, and if you've seen those videos, you'll know that it's basically the same exact rinse, wash, and repeat type recommendations and skill level that I'm going to mention right now. So to keep it simple, basically these kits here can be built by just about anybody. That's the idea specifically from the creator of World War Toons, who I actually had the pleasure of meeting and interviewing about a year ago. These models can be built by a beginner, they can be built by an intermediate, and of course they can be built by an advanced. All three of those individuals will basically build it to the best of their abilities and will have end results that will mirror all three of those skill sets. This model here was definitely no exception. It was an absolute blast to work on, and the model goes together very quickly, very efficiently, and also extremely enjoyably, which are basically the perfect hallmarks you want whenever you're dealing with any plastic model kit. The vehicle subject matter is an excellent choice, and the execution is also equally as excellently done. The M24 Chaffee is a very unique vehicle because it's one of those vehicles that bridges the gap between the end of World War II and also into the Cold War era. The M24 was made in great numbers and was widely exported and utilized to great effect by many NATO countries in the post-war years. You can render this like I've done over here in the American configuration, with this one being your standard traditional late World War II or early 1950s olive drab, or the Korean War variant with the tiger, or I always like to call it the eagle face painting scheme that you see presently. On top of the US usage, this vehicle, of course, was also utilized by the French in Indochina, not to mention several other NATO countries for many years, and each one of these countries had their own different slant on paint jobs and other details that can possibly be explored by the builder. So because of that, there is quite a bit of artistic licensing that can be exhibited into one of these kits. And that's if you're just going to go with the, traditional type rendition. There are a lot of individuals out there who are into Warhammer 40k, and they've taken these kits and turned them into vehicles that would fit into that type of universe. So I've seen one individual mention that they use them for orcs or some other type of factions that are in that gaming universe, and if it works for that outcome, that's probably a sector of the hobby that I'm pretty sure the designers of the game and these kits probably didn't even think of, but are probably really happy that they suit that niche quite well. Lately, I've seen a bunch of aftermarket companies pop up that offer detail upgrades for these kits here, and I've seen components such as replacement barrels with CNC units, as well as 3D printed and cast resin full conversion sets, where you can take one of these models and deck it out to the nines. Or if you just want to build it out of the box like I've done over here, that's also something that is more than adequate, and these builds just offer just a lot of fun and a lot of variety for a model that really does punch above its own weight. And I think we've officially crossed those lines now into recommendations. So clearly, if you're a fan of the World War Toons video game, this is a sentence I really don't need to finish. Another individual I'd recommend these kits to would be anyone who's just into World War II armor, post-World War II armor, American armor, or just the M24 Chaffee fans in general. There are quite a few M24 Chaffee kits on the market, specifically in recent years, and if you do have a couple of those kits in your collection, the addition of this one over here would definitely have a nice little benefit of adding a bit more variety and uniqueness to your collection, not to mention makes for an interesting conversation piece. As I've stated in the other World War Toons videos, these models here I would also recommend for anyone who's an older individual and are looking to get back into the plastic model hobby. If you built some kits back in the day, but you left the hobby for one reason or another, but are interested to get back in, these kits here are excellent. They are very affordable, they are very forgiving, and they're very easily built. This is a great way to dust off some of your older techniques, and it's a nice welcome back into the hobby without doing something that's a bit overly complicated, also a kit that can be potentially overly costly. Along similar lines, the World War Toons models are an excellent practice model. Say you have one of the more advanced and expensive kits that are on the market, be it from one flavor or another, or vehicle type or another, and you're looking to paint the model a certain way, but you're not really sure yourself. The last thing you want to do is wing it on that expensive model to have potentially disastrous results. Well, these World War Toons models over here are a great way to practice getting those skills honed in so that when you try the techniques or the paint pattern on the real deal, you're not going to be stumbling around in the dark and you're going to have your practice already ironed out. This is something that can be a very useful aid for that type of an individual. Along similar lines as the older individual, I definitely recommend this kit to a younger person who's looking to get into the hobby of plastic models. These models here are an excellent welcome mat because of the same reasons that I touched upon earlier, being the easy construction, the relatively low cost, and also the speed that these models can be built. Another thing that a youth person is going to find interesting about these models is that they do have some playability. These models are designed to be a very sturdy and robust model with the way the models are molded with the ABS plastic, not to mention with the overall size of the parts. It tends to lend itself for a chunky little robust model, and that does have some playability to it. Of course, if you are roughhousing with the thing and you are playing with it quite often, don't be surprised if you lose a couple parts here or there, but that is something that is to be expected, and these models are still far more robust compared to several other kits on the market. Also, because of the availability and cost, these models here are excellent gifts. If you have a model builder in your life and you're looking to get them something, and they're the type of person that has like one of everything, I guarantee these World War Toons models are an interesting gift to give them because chances are they may not necessarily have one in their collection, and if they receive one, it's definitely something that they could build very quickly and have a blast while doing so. Along similar lines, if you are the type of person who's a parent, a grandparent, uncle, or an aunt, and are looking to have some quality time with a very special person in your life, these kits here are an excellent way to spend a nice weekend afternoon or an after-school type activity because of all those exact same reasons. And it's the type of thing that that person will greatly appreciate and will build some very fond memories for years to come. And also, with the completion of the Chaffee kit here, as well as the other World War Toons tank that I'm going to be posting around the same time, this, I believe, marks the end of the available kits out there from the World War Toons lineup. That's right, I think I've actually collected them all. I have an example of basically every one of the kits in the World War Toons lineup, and it feels so good to finally have the entire What? Wait, what? There's another one? No, when did they... Are you serious? Alright, so scratch that, which is great. Apparently there's another kit out there that I've yet to build, and I'm pretty sure you're going to be seeing that one come across this table next April Fool's Day. And with that, that wraps up this model showcase video for these two World War Toons caricaturized M24 Chaffee light tanks. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel where it's a fantastic way to keep up to date on new posted content, being small scale model showcase videos like these ones over here, or the other larger scale project update videos that frequently get posted to this channel. Another way to keep in loop of new posted content is by liking us on Facebook. There, I have more photographs of these two particular builds, as well as the other smaller and larger scale builds that have been seen on this channel in the past. Furthermore, don't forget to swing by eastcoastarmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks again. I'll be seeing you all again on the next one. Till then.